Hey there, welcome back. This is the episode where we're talking about performance evaluation in the context of ISO 9001. We're talking about section 9, and we're going to go through and talk about monitoring and measurement. We're going to talk about customer satisfaction, analysis and evaluation, and internal audits. So it's moving through the latter part of the standard. Now, this is the second most important part of the standard in my view, so we'll discuss it in detail. Okay, so bear with me on this section of the standard. We've got a fair bit to cover, but this is the ultimate, this is the section of the standard that actually, it's the time that you take to step back and look at the performance of your organisation. Now, I joke a lot out there when we're talking to people and I'm doing keynote speeches and those sorts of things where we're talking about, well, how do we actually look at this? I'd like you to look into your own world here and talk about something like a fitness goal. You might have set yourself a task to run a marathon. You might have set your task to get, eat properly, lose some weight, all those sorts of things that become the daily challenges of just living life. So for an organisation, it's got the same problem. I'll completely agree with everybody else out there. Best practice is not immune from things like increased complexity, increases to documentation, records, systems, processes, bureaucracy, all those sorts of things. We're not immune, we're a company as well. And so this part of the standard for me is really, really important because it's the time that you do the spring clean. It's the time that you can start looking at how you can be more efficient, more effective, and produce more. So what I'm going to do in the next sector of this video, we're going to go through and we're going to have a look at each of these clauses in isolation. Okay, let's look through section 9, performance evaluation, and I'm going to start with 9.1, monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation. Now, I'm not going to read the standard to you, but what we're going to talk about is what does it intend and what's the intent behind what it's saying. So it's essentially what's happening is the organisation shall determine what needs to be monitored, measured, what needs to be analysed, evaluated, when is that going to happen, and when the results for monitoring and measurement shall be analysed and evaluated. So there's a little tip here, which is a bit of an industry trend. It's who, what, when, where, how, and why. Now, if you want to take some notes, if I'm giving you tips like this, don't forget to pause this video and you can go back, write those notes, and don't forget to share it. So let's look at this. So it's who, what, when, where, how, and why. So what are we going to measure? Who's going to measure it? When are we going to measure it? When are we going to report it? When are we going to analyse it? How's that going to be done? All those sorts of things. So that's a really good tip for making the plan for the monitoring, measurement, analysis, and evaluation of the business. At best practice, we've got 30 graphs. We put them up on the wall in both offices every Monday, and increasingly we're going to move to an online sort of reporting panel. But at the moment, we find a great lot of value to everybody has a chat and looks at the previous week and how we went and what we need to do to improve. So ultimately, the intent of this part of the standard is that it's the actual tactical part of the self-evaluation cycle, and it's something that all organisations, when they're implementing best practice, they're improving what they're doing, they're moving forward, they're enjoying some success. It's the time to actually stop. Now, it might be just stopping for a minute, looking at the stats, looking at the report, and moving on, but more importantly, actually how you're going to influence, how you're going to change. The organisation shall retain appropriate documented information as evidence of the results. For us at best practice, there's 30 graphs up on the wall every Monday. Now, it's not about keeping lots and lots of records for years and years and years. It's just about saying, in your system, this is the time we stop and look at the results. This is the time we stop and do a bit of a trends analysis and make fact-based decisions about where we've got problems, where we'd like to improve, and are the changes that we're making having an effect. Now, if any of you out there have any involvement in social media and any of the platforms available to do the analytics, that's what we're talking about. If you've got a safety management system that's got an analytics section, if you've got a business management system that's got a dashboard, if you've got an internal business reporting, it's all of the lead indicators, that's a key word, all of the lead indicators of your performance. The number of times things are happening, widgets, products, services, numbers of people, man hours, maintenance hours, all those sorts of things form all of the tactics that you pull into your system to track the ultimate objective, which is, are we going to deliver on the promise that we made to the customer? Now, it's the promise that you make to all of the customers in the marketplace or a specific project by project, client by client basis. So are we going to make that promise and are we going to deliver? So when we dig a little bit deeper into the standard, off the back of my last point, we look at clause 9.1.2 where we talk about customer satisfaction. And this part of the standard is intending that the organisation has a look at customers' perceptions of the degree to which their needs and expectations are fulfilled, and the organisation shall determine the methods for obtaining, monitoring and reviewing this information. So how are you going to engage with your customers? Now, for a very long time, people sent out customer satisfaction forms. Now, the last thing I'm going to do if I'm your customer is want to fill out a form. Like, that's just about the best way to upset a customer. So how are you going to gently solicit information out of your clients to actually see whether you're meeting their promise and you're delivering, or is there anything that you can potentially do? Now, in the modern world, I can honestly say that we all know about this trend. Let's sit down, have a cup of coffee, or catch up, have a cup of coffee, and talk about what we can do to work more effectively together. And you know what? It's okay to put that in your system. If you're looking at sales results, for example, you're selling chocolate ice cream in the supermarket, you're selling trucks, you're selling services, you're selling pipes, you're selling call center support or customer service support. If your sales drop off, that's a good sign that your customers aren't happy. So don't forget, it doesn't necessarily mean that you need to go out to your customers. The standard's not specifically saying ask your customer, send them a form. The standard is saying the organisation shall monitor customers' perceptions of the degree to which their needs and expectations have been fulfilled. So just really go back to the standard, have a look at it and say, well, how does that apply in my business? And take a little bit of time there. There's a bunch of examples that the standard gives you, which I would disagree with. And I'm going to put that to ISO and I'm going to put it to the community. I'm making a lot of noise out there. It says examples. So those examples include customer surveys, customer feedback on delivery of products and services, meetings with customers, market share analysis, compliments, warranty claims, and dealer reports. I think that what's really critical here is that, obviously this is 2015 edition of the standard. It's completely neglected any form of social media outburst. Now, yes, you can say it's implied because you can see those sorts of things here. But what we're going to start to see is significant trends out there, and we've seen it with a number of social media platforms where businesses or brands just get absolutely bashed on mass scale, and I'm talking mass scale, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands of comments. So, I think the standards missed the point in terms of what is real life. Let's talk about reality today, which is 2016, and let's talk about the fact that these platforms, there's a bunch of these platforms that have been around for well over 10 years now, and it's completely missed the point. Yes, it hasn't named names, but it hasn't understood the context here. So yes, you can look at market share analysis, and when you're talking about market share analysis, how many likes have you got on your social media page versus your competitor's social media page? So you can start to do that market analysis, and you can understand maybe where you're missing the plot and missing the point, if you like. So, let's look at real life examples. You can go through and follow the daily trends in terms of the comments, the feedback, the shares, all those sorts of things that you're getting out in the public environment. That is a very, very transparent marketplace now. That's where you focus. Okay, what we're going to do now is going to move on to section 9.1.3, analysis and evaluation, and then we'll talk quickly about internal audits. So what the standard's implying here is that the organisation analyse and evaluate data, and appropriate data more specifically, and information arising from monitoring and measurement. What we want to look for is we want to evaluate conformity of products and services. Did that product or service go the way you planned? The degree of customer satisfaction. So look, I think you can ask your customer to give you a score out of 5, but I think maybe what gets missed was, when you had that final, interaction with your customer, were they smiling? Were they having fun? Were they having an amazing experience? So I think, if I do a bit of a case study here, which is something recent, is let's talk about Facebook. Now, if you're advertising on Facebook and you're considering Facebook ads, if your ads are not very positive, uplifting, and creating an amazing experience for your customer in the Facebook environment, then you're going to get that ad shut down. Facebook's going to say, that's not what we want. We want people to be interacting on our platform. We want our people to, our members to be having an amazing experience. Now, if you're creating negativity, if there's any sort of negative thread in your ad, and that's like, are you feeling raw, down and out and all those sorts of things in your ads, they're not going to get approved. So I think what's really important is the degree from the customer satisfaction perspective is, just a really simple thing you can do is my customer smiling? Did they, wow, that was absolutely amazing. amazing. That was fantastic. It's excellent. Thank you so much. I'm going to send all my friends. That's the sort of thing you want to look at. Definitely don't send out a form. Don't send out a survey monkey. You know, don't send out an email. Don't send out a text message. The thing that shits me the most is where my car gets serviced is I get these text messages, and if I don't respond to the text, I'm getting it like the next day, the next day, the next day. I haven't got time to like talk to my son after he finishes school, let alone fill out the text for my mechanic to see if he can do a better service. So, you want to be really, really careful that implementing this process is just, observing your customers. Are they enjoying? Would you buy from your organisation? How would you feel if you got the service that your organisation delivers? That's going to give you the real insight, and that's the intention here of the standard in terms of, what we would like to see from a best practice perspective. Let's just finish off this clause before we move on to internal audits. So, performance and effectiveness of the quality management system. Let's just talk about performance and effectiveness of the business management system. If you've got out-of-date procedures and policies, let's just delete those and move on. You want to see that the instructions that you've got to give the people in your organisation guidance to do what they need to do, you want to make sure that stuff is relevant and it's current. And what we talk about here at Best Practice is our winning formula. Is our winning formula, those guidance notes that we've got, is that stuff up to date? We want to also talk about the effectiveness of actions taken to address risks and opportunities. Did we achieve our goals? How did our projects go? Are our controls to prevent, the shit hitting the fan? Are those things in place? And this is the time when you're talking about when are we going to look at the possibility that the shit's going to hit the fan? When are we going to look at whether our projects to improve our business have been executed? We want to look at the performance of external providers. The new standard's talking about providers, but this is your suppliers, and this is the other things that you bring into the organisation before you do your value add to create your service. So it's really important to be having a look at, that integration. Do you bring that thing in-house because you've got more control over it, or do you outsource it because you're going to get a better result? Always in and out and in and out. I see it all the time in businesses. Okay, we're going to go out and we're going to outsource this. Oh, now we're bringing it back in-house because it's not working. So it's something to really, really think about, when you're actually going to look at that, because that's what we're in here. It's like the who, what, when, where, how of analysis and evaluation. And the last point here is G, the need for improvements to the whole system itself. We're making big improvements here at Best Practice, and video is definitely one of the things we're doing. Rather than missing the intention of what we wanted to communicate in the form of black and white text. And lots of people have heard me bang on about this, and I'm going to say it here again, is we spend too much time worrying about documenting policies and procedures and putting black text on white. Here it is on my screen, this whole black text white thing. We waste too much time trying to put the punctuation in the right place and the comma, when in fact it can be expertly communicated face-to-face in this sort of environment. So what we're starting to see out in marketplace, and we're implementing ourselves, is a move to a more of a recorded speech type environment, pictures, eliciting emotion, hearing vocal tone, eye contact, all those sorts of things to communicate. So what we're doing here is we're analysing the need to do those things. And ultimately, this is part of your system that includes the statistical analysis. And I think that's really important. There's lots of trends out there to look at, things like Six Sigma and all the different statistical, and technical, terms and techniques. I think that's really, really critical, because you can actually start to see things like trends, and you can analyse, well, is actually that a trend? And you can see the numbers going up and down, looking at performance over time. And for a very, very long time, I've been telling people to have the performance over time graph. And in fact, that's ultimately what we did with our logo. A bit of shameless self-promotion here for our ISO 9001 certification, Mark, but this is our whole explanation here, is it's a performance over time graph. And for a very long time in training courses, and some of you guys out there watching this will have seen me present, where I said go away and draw 50 graphs to track your organisation's performance that give you a clear picture of your performance. And this is the part of the standard that talks about that. Okay, now let's talk about section 9.2, internal audits. The organisation shall conduct internal audits at planned intervals. Now ultimately what you're looking to do is have two objectives or two goals met here. And the first is, are we following our own intention? Are we doing what we said we would do? And then the second part is, are we following the intent of the standard? Now I'm going to break this up because it's really, really critical. With internal audits, and I'm a great advocate of this, maybe it's not the right term, maybe we can call them, business vitality surveys or cultural vitality surveys or process reviews, and give it a really, really positive, give it a positive title so that people embrace it. But there's a couple of great things that happen. And obviously the two objectives of the standard is, are you doing what you said you would do? So what's your winning formula? Are you following that? If you're cooking chocolate cakes, are you following how to cook the chocolate cake? You're using the ingredients that the recipe says. You're following the method that the recipe says, because that was designed to get this outcome. Now, disregard the fact that people don't like that type of chocolate cake anymore. That's what your winning formula said, and that's the outcome. But you know what happens in organisations? People say, actually, we want to make a few tweaks to the chocolate cake. They change the formula without actually, updating the winning formula that's, captured in a document or a process or a video or a recipe. So they make the changes, through practice and practice and practice, and they know how to do it standing on their head. But what they actually don't do is update the guidance that's used. So, I like to think about cookbooks. You see new additions to really, really great, best-selling cookbooks. You see new versions, new prints, new changes to them as they tweak the recipes. So what's really, really important to understand is that you're going to need to do that too in your organisation. And in the old days we used to joke about the fact that, what if Joe, the manager, gets hit by a bus? Who's going to pick up from there? Well, Joe was just all consumed in actually doing his job. He didn't worry too much about updating his procedures, and he got hit by the bus and there wasn't anything anyway. So let's just be really realistic about what this means here, is that the internal audits are to capture, are you doing what you said you would do? And are you following the intent of the standard? Now, this is really, really critical. This standard, I'm a great believer in, is absolutely amazing. It's been around for a very long time in a whole bunch of versions. It's great guidance on setting up a business plan and actually executing a business plan, all of the tactics to implement to actually run a successful organisation. And I've got a lot of faith in it. I've seen it used, successfully used, thousands and thousands of times. So if you either accidentally or intentionally don't follow one of the sections of the standard, then how can you guarantee that you're going to get success? And I can honestly say that the organisations that we see that we're reviewing that don't have success, they've, in most cases, accidentally or can't be bothered to actually diligently and successfully implement a clause of the standard. So what the standard's saying here in section 9.2.12, A2, is that follow the intent of the standard, and ultimately you want to see in section B there, it's effectively implemented and maintained. So my tip here, my top tip before I finish this clause is, have you got a set of instructions connected to the promises you're making to your customers that's documented, implemented and maintained? And that's been something that I've been campaigning for a very, very long time. So if you're new to ISO, if you're new to quality management systems, you're trying to understand what to do, start with the concept of a cookbook. Now, what's really interesting about cookbooks and cooking TV shows is they often work really well together. You've got somebody delivering a message that's got, a charismatic personality, they've got a great picture, they've got a methodology, and they've got the ingredients. And if you feel inspired by that person, you look at the picture and you go, yes, that looks amazing, looks really yummy, and then you can actually then follow the method using the ingredients, then you're going to get a great outcome. But it's really, really simple. Organisations have overcomplicated what we've got here in terms of giving a set of guidance, and I'll cover that in the next video when we're looking at the things that we can do to guide people. But ultimately here in internal audits, it's your opportunity to step back and say, you know what, we can more effectively communicate this message so people will understand what we need to do. Okay, let's just quickly talk about assembling the internal audit program and the analysis and all that sort of stuff. The standard's got some specifics here. I'm not sure how relevant it's going to be moving into the future, but the current standard says that it's a requirement, so let's talk about it. You need to have an audit program. It's like a roster of who's going to check what out in the organisation to make sure that everything's operating, particularly if you've got global reach and you've got lots of different offices and locations and factories and facilities around the world. I think that you've got to plan that, you've got to establish this program, you've got to put it in place. You need to think about frequencies and methods, particularly if you've got a whole bunch of people running around looking at different parts of the organisation. You need to record and report You need to talk about the scope and criteria for each of the assessments or audits that you're going to take place, selecting audits, conducting them, making sure they're objective and impartial. I think that's really important, that people don't audit their own work, keep it simple. And I'll get to that point, I'll come back to that point because that's the final point that I want to make. You want to make sure audits are reported and that people get to hear, you know, the managers responsible for different parts of the business get to hear what can be improved. Now, I want to make one final point about internal audits. I feel, in my observation, that the most fundamental value that's delivered to an organisation out of this section of the standard is learning. Now, when I see internal audit programs effectively implemented, what I see is that a team of people get really, really anxious and they go and learn a lot about the organisation, and it's often the auditor. Now, we do see a lot that internal auditors get trained and they get a title, and that's their business card and their job description. They're the internal assessor or auditor or quality manager of the business. What I see happen is those people build incredible wealth of knowledge about the organisation. So here's my recommendation. This is my top tip. You don't get the person responsible for your business management system to do your audits because they know a bunch of stuff already. You share it around. Everybody in the organisation should get a go at having a look at another part of the organisation and understanding how it works. And I guarantee you, without a doubt, it'll do two things. It'll lift your culture because people get to understand more about what happens in another part of the business and the pains and frustrations. And also, it's the best way to get people in your business to read what it is that they need to do. Because when peers are reviewing each other, not, you know, the quality manager, the internal auditor, when peers are reviewing each other, they hold each other accountable. More that they want to have a friendly interaction and they want to understand what they need to do. You will get less pushback from the people being audited from that result. So there you go, they're my top tips. I reckon it's a great part of the standard. It's got a boring heading. I hope I've made it exciting. We'll see you soon.